Maya Chen stood in her childhood bedroom, staring at the empty garment bag that should have contained her custom-designed graduation dress. The bag hung limp and accusing from her closet door, while downstairs, laughter echoed from the kitchen where her cousin Vivian was showing off the very same dress to their grandmother. What happened next would forever change their family dynamics, but Maya couldn't have predicted just how far she would go to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Chen family had always been complicated, bound together by tradition and torn apart by unspoken hierarchies that traced back generations. Maya had learned early in life that being the eldest granddaughter in a traditional Chinese-American family came with expectations, but also with the peculiar burden of watching her younger cousin Vivian receive the kind of effortless affection that seemed to elude her own grasp. Growing up in San Francisco's Richmond district, Maya lived just 6 blocks away from her Aunt Linda's house, where Vivian enjoyed the status of being the only child in a household that revolved entirely around her needs and desires. Every Sunday, both families would gather at their grandmother's house on 38th Avenue, a ritual that had continued unbroken for as long as Maya could remember. During these gatherings, Maya watched as Vivian performed the delicate dance of being simultaneously respectful to their elders and charmingly manipulative in ways that somehow never registered as calculation to the adults. Maya's own parents, David and Susan Chen, ran a small accounting firm that demanded long hours and constant attention. They were practical people who valued hard work and achievement, often telling Maya that success would come through dedication rather than charm. Meanwhile, Aunt Linda worked part-time at a boutique in Union Square, spending her afternoons picking up Vivian from her private school and taking her to piano lessons, art classes, and shopping trips that always seemed to result in some new outfit or accessory that would be prominently displayed at the next family gathering. The patterns established themselves early and reinforced themselves consistently. When Maya made honor roll for 3 consecutive semesters, her grandmother would nod approvingly and comment on how Maya was following in her father's footsteps, destined for a practical career. When Vivian performed a simple piano piece at their grandmother's birthday party, the entire family would gather around, phones recording, as if witnessing a prodigy in the making. Maya learned to excel quietly, to accept praise that came with qualifiers, to understand that her accomplishments were expected rather than celebrated. The differences between the cousins became more pronounced as they entered their teenage years. Maya attended the local public high school, where she threw herself into advanced placement courses and volunteer work, building a resume that would eventually earn her a scholarship to UC Berkeley. Vivian attended Sacred Heart Catholic Preparatory, where her mother's connections had secured her admission despite mediocre grades, and where she cultivated relationships with other well-connected families who moved in San Francisco's social circles. Maya remembered the exact moment she realized how deeply these patterns had shaped her relationship with her cousin. She was 16, standing in her grandmother's living room after another family dinner, when Vivian casually mentioned that she had been accepted to the summer art program in Paris that Maya had been researching for months. Maya had spent weeks preparing her application, writing essays about her passion for fashion design and her dreams of studying abroad. She had never mentioned her plans to Vivian, but somehow her cousin had not only learned about the program, but had applied and been accepted with what appeared to be minimal effort. "How did you even know about that program?" Maya had asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Vivian shrugged, examining her newly manicured nails. "Your mom mentioned it to my mom. She said you were planning to check it out too. I guess they really liked my portfolio." Maya's mother looked uncomfortable, clearly not having intended for her casual conversation with her sister-in-law to result in this outcome. "Maya, there are other programs," she offered weakly. "It's okay," Maya replied, because what else could she say? That she had spent months preparing for this specific opportunity? That Vivian's portfolio consisted mainly of sketches she had done during boring classes rather than the carefully curated collection Maya had been developing for years? That once again her cousin had effortlessly claimed something Maya had worked toward? The Paris program became a recurring theme in family conversations throughout the rest of that summer. Vivian would regale them with stories of her adventures, showing photos of herself at famous landmarks and designer boutiques, while Maya quietly adjusted her college application essays to focus on other experiences and other dreams. She told herself it didn't matter, that there would be other opportunities, that she was building character through these disappointments. But something hardened inside her during those months, a protective shell that would influence every interaction with her cousin from that point forward. College provided Maya with the distance she needed to develop her own identity, away from the constant comparisons and competitions that had defined her teenage years. At UC Berkeley, she flourished in the fashion design program, finally finding a community that appreciated her aesthetic vision and technical skills. She spent summers interning at design houses in Los Angeles and New York, building a portfolio that represented her own voice rather than a reaction to someone else's success. Vivian, meanwhile, enrolled at San Francisco State University, choosing to live at home and commute to campus. She changed her major 3 times before settling on communications, a decision that seemed less about passion and more about finding the path of least resistance toward graduation. During Maya's brief visits home, family conversations would inevitably turn to Vivian's latest romantic drama or social media success, while Maya's internships and design projects were acknowledged with polite interest before the conversation moved on to more immediately engaging topics. The pattern might have continued indefinitely, with Maya building her life and career away from the family dynamics that had once defined her sense of self-worth, if not for the events that began to unfold during her senior year of college. Maya had been commissioned to design a dress for her own graduation ceremony, a project that had evolved from a simple assignment into a deeply personal expression of her growth as both a designer and a person. The dress was a masterpiece of subtle elegance, featuring hand-sewn beadwork that caught the light in unexpected ways, and a silhouette that managed to be both classic and distinctly modern. She had spent months perfecting every detail, sourcing the silk from a specialty supplier in Los Angeles and learning traditional beading techniques from an elderly seamstress in Chinatown. The dress represented everything she had learned about design, but more importantly, it represented her emergence as someone who could create beauty rather than simply compete for attention. She planned to wear it to her graduation ceremony and then preserve it as a symbol of this transformative period in her life. Maya brought the dress home to San Francisco 3 weeks before graduation, hanging it carefully in her childhood bedroom while she prepared for the ceremony and the celebration dinner her parents had planned at their grandmother's house. The dress hung in its protective garment bag like a secret, a physical manifestation of the confidence and skill she had developed during her years away from home. 2 days before graduation, Maya returned from a final fitting for her cap and gown to find the garment bag empty and Vivian wearing the dress. Their grandmother was examining the beadwork with obvious admiration, while Aunt Linda took photos from multiple angles, directing Vivian to turn this way and that to capture the way the light played across the intricate details. "Maya," their grandmother exclaimed when she noticed her standing in the doorway, "come see how beautiful your cousin looks in your dress. The beadwork is exquisite."
"You did wonderful work." Maya felt the blood drain from her face as she took in the scene. Vivian stood in the center of the kitchen, arms slightly extended to display the dress, wearing an expression of innocent pleasure that somehow made the betrayal even more devastating. The dress fit her differently than it fit Maya, the proportions slightly off in ways that only the original designer would notice, but it was undeniably beautiful on her cousin's frame. "I hope you don't mind," Vivian said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of apologetic entitlement that Maya remembered from countless childhood incidents. "I was helping your mom organize your closet and I saw it hanging there. I couldn't resist trying it on. It's absolutely gorgeous, Maya. You're so talented." "I'm wearing that to graduation," Maya managed to say, though her voice sounded distant and hollow even to her own ears. "Oh," Vivian replied, as if this possibility had never occurred to her. "I was hoping I could borrow it for the charity gala next weekend, the one at the Fairmont. I'm going with Jonathan, and this would be perfect for the theme. They're honoring young artists and entrepreneurs." Jonathan was Vivian's latest boyfriend, an investment banker whose family moved in the same social circles that Vivian had been cultivating since high school. Maya had met him once and found him pleasant but unremarkable, the kind of person who valued connections over conversations and who would undoubtedly appreciate having a girlfriend who could hold her own at high society events. "That's my graduation dress," Maya repeated, struggling to maintain her composure in front of their grandmother, who was watching the exchange with growing confusion. "Girls," Aunt Linda interjected with the kind of forced cheerfulness she employed during uncomfortable family moments, "I'm sure we can figure something out. Maya, couldn't you wear something else to graduation? The ceremony is so formal anyway, and everyone will be wearing caps and gowns. This dress really would be perfect for Vivian's event." "I designed it for my graduation," Maya said, each word carefully enunciated. "I spent months working on it." "And it's beautiful," their grandmother said, clearly trying to mediate. "But Vivian has this important event, and you're so creative, Maya. Couldn't you design something else?" The suggestion hung in the air like a physical weight. Maya looked around the kitchen at the three women who were waiting for her response, who seemed genuinely puzzled by her reluctance to simply surrender the dress to her cousin's more immediate social needs. It was the Paris program all over again, the same casual assumption that Maya's work and plans were infinitely flexible, while Vivian's desires were fixed points around which everyone else should adjust their expectations. "I need some air," Maya said finally, turning and walking out of the kitchen before anyone could respond. She spent the next hour walking through Golden Gate Park, trying to process what had just happened and what it meant for her relationship with her family. By the time she returned home, Vivian had left, but the dress remained absent from Maya's closet. Her mother was waiting in the living room, clearly prepared for a difficult conversation. "Your cousin really needs this, Maya. This gala is a big opportunity for her. Jonathan's family will be there, and you know how important first impressions are in those circles." "It's my graduation dress, Mom. I made it specifically for my graduation." "I know, honey, and it's beautiful, but you're so talented. You can make another one. Vivian doesn't have those skills. This might be her only chance to make the kind of impression that could really change her future." Maya stared at her mother, recognizing the same logic that had shaped every family decision for as long as she could remember. Maya was capable, therefore she could adapt. Vivian was delicate, therefore she needed accommodation. The pattern was so deeply ingrained that her mother seemed genuinely unable to understand why Maya might object to this latest iteration of the same dynamic. "What if I said no?" Maya asked quietly. Her mother looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Why would you say no? She's your cousin. Family helps family." "Family doesn't steal graduation dresses." "She didn't steal anything. She asked to borrow it. And it's not like you can't make another one." Maya realized in that moment that no argument would penetrate the fundamental assumptions that governed her family's interactions. Her skills were a resource to be shared, while Vivian's needs were priorities to be met.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The dress was already gone, probably hanging in Vivian's closet, being altered to fit her measurements for the gala that would take place the day before Maya's graduation ceremony. That night, Maya called her best friend from college, Sarah, and explained the situation through tears of frustration and betrayal. Sarah listened quietly before asking the question that would change everything. What's the one thing Vivian values more than anything else? Attention, Maya replied without hesitation. She wants to be the center of attention, the special one, the one everyone talks about. Then that's where you hit back. The idea that began to form during that conversation was audacious in its simplicity and devastating in its potential impact. Maya spent the rest of the week researching, planning, and making phone calls, driven by a clarity of purpose that surprised her with its intensity. If her family couldn't understand why the dress mattered, She would teach them in a way they couldn't ignore or dismiss. Maya's graduation ceremony took place on a sunny Saturday morning in Berkeley's Greek Theater. She wore a simple black dress she had purchased the day before, elegant but unremarkable, and she accepted her diploma with the same quiet dignity that had characterized her academic career. Her parents attended, as did her grandmother, but Vivian was notably absent, presumably recovering from the gala that had taken place the night before. During the reception that followed the ceremony, Maya's phone buzzed with the text from Vivian. "Congrats on graduating. The gala was amazing. Your dress was perfect. Got so many compliments. Thank you so much for letting me borrow it. XXXX." Maya showed the text to Sarah, who was standing beside her with her own family. "Phase 1 complete," Sarah said with grim satisfaction. "Ready for Phase 2? The celebration dinner that evening at their grandmother's house proceeded exactly as Maya had expected. Vivian arrived wearing a casual sundress, the graduation dress having been returned to Maya's closet with a thank you note that somehow managed to be both grateful and dismissive. She regaled the family with stories from the gala, describing the important people she had met and the connections she had made, while Maya listened with apparent interest and growing anticipation. "Jonathan's mother was so impressed," Vivian was saying as they finished the main course. "She said the dress showed such sophisticated taste. She actually asked where I got it, and when I told her my cousin designed it, she said she might be interested in commissioning something for her daughter's wedding." Maya nodded politely, making appropriate sounds of interest while mentally checking off another item on her list. Everything was proceeding exactly as she had hoped. "Speaking of weddings," Maya said during a brief lull in Vivian's monologue, "I have some news to share." The table fell quiet, all attention turning to her. Maya had learned to time these moments carefully, waiting for the exact instant when she could capture and hold the room's complete focus. "I've been offered a position at Marchesa," she announced, naming one of the most prestigious fashion houses in New York. "I'll be starting as an assistant designer next month." The silence that followed was pregnant with surprise and something that might have been pride. Maya's parents exchanged glances, clearly trying to process this development that their daughter had somehow managed to keep secret. "Maya, that's wonderful," her grandmother said finally. "What an opportunity." "How did this happen?" her father asked, his practical mind already working through the logistics. "When did you apply?" "I didn't apply," Maya replied, savoring the moment. "They approached me. Apparently, someone at the charity gala last night was wearing one of my designs, and it caught the attention of one of Marchesa's talent scouts. They made some inquiries, reviewed my portfolio, and made an offer this afternoon." She watched as understanding dawned on her family's faces, particularly Vivian's, whose expression shifted from confusion to realization to something approaching panic. "Wait, you mean the dress I wore last night led to your job offer?" "That's exactly what I mean." The scout was quite impressed with the beadwork and the overall construction. She said it showed exceptional technical skill and artistic vision. Apparently, she spent most of the evening trying to figure out who the designer was. The table erupted in congratulations and excited chatter, but Maya kept her eyes fixed on Vivian, who was beginning to understand the full implications of what had just transpired. By wearing Maya's dress to a high-profile event, she had inadvertently launched her cousin's career in the most spectacular way possible. "But this is wonderful," Aunt Linda said, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Vivian helped Maya get this opportunity." "She did, although I'm not sure she meant to." Over the following weeks, as Maya prepared for her move to New York, the family dynamic shifted in subtle but significant ways. Her parents, finally grasping the magnitude of her achievement, began asking detailed questions about her career plans and expressing pride that felt genuine rather than obligatory. Her grandmother started referring to her as our designer when talking to neighbors and friends.
Even Aunt Linda seemed to view Maya with new respect, though she remained protective of Vivian's feelings.
Vivian herself became increasingly distant, communicating primarily through polite text messages and avoiding the family gatherings where Maya's upcoming move dominated the conversation. Maya felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and guilt about her cousin's obvious discomfort, but she also felt something else: freedom from the patterns that had constrained their relationship for so long. 2 weeks before Maya's departure for New York, Vivian finally called to arrange a private conversation. They met at a coffee shop in the Mission District, neutral territory that allowed them to speak without the weight of family expectations hanging over their words. "I know what you did," Vivian said without preamble once they had ordered their drinks. "What do you mean?" Maya replied, though she made no effort to sound genuinely confused. "You knew that wearing your dress to the gala would get you noticed. You planned this whole thing." Maya considered denying the accusation, but she found that she was tired of the elaborate dance they had performed around each other for so many years. "Yes," she said simply. "I did." Vivian stared at her for a long moment, and Maya could see her processing this admission, trying to understand how her quiet, accommodating cousin had outmaneuvered her so completely. "Why?" Vivian asked finally. "Because you took something that belonged to me, just like you always have. Because you assumed I would make another dress, just like I always have. Because you never considered that my work might matter as much as your social opportunities. I was going to give it back." "That's not the point, Viv. The point is that you took it without asking, because you've never had to consider what I might want or need. You've spent our entire lives assuming that my achievements were resources for you to use, and my feelings were obstacles for you to navigate." Vivian's face flushed, and Maya could see that her words had found their target. "That's not fair. I never meant to hurt you." "I know you didn't. That's what makes it worse. You hurt me casually, thoughtlessly, the same way you might step on an ant without noticing. At least if you had done it deliberately, I could have attributed it to malice instead of indifference." They sat in silence for several minutes, sipping their coffee and avoiding eye contact. Maya felt no satisfaction in finally speaking these truths, only a weary relief that the words had finally been said. "So what happens now?" Vivian asked eventually. "Now I move to New York and build a career. You continue your life here. Maybe we learn to be cousins instead of competitors." "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I. But I think the first step is acknowledging that we've both been playing a game that hurt us both." Vivian nodded slowly, and Maya could see tears gathering in her cousin's eyes. "I'm sorry about the dress. I really didn't think about how much it meant to you." "I know. And I'm sorry for using the situation to manipulate you. I could have just asked for it back." "Would I have given it back?" Maya considered the question honestly. "Probably not. Not without making it into a big family drama where I would have been painted as the selfish one for not sharing." "You're right," Vivian admitted. "I probably would have found a way to make you the bad guy." They talked for another hour, carefully navigating conversations they had never been able to have before. Maya learned that Vivian had always felt overshadowed by her cousin's academic achievements and creative talents, that the attention she received from their family felt hollow because it was based on need rather than admiration. Vivian learned that Maya had spent years feeling invisible and undervalued, that her quiet competence had been both a survival strategy and a prison. By the time they parted ways, nothing had been fully resolved, but something had shifted. They were no longer performing the roles they had inherited, no longer trapped in the patterns that had defined their relationship since childhood. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was understanding, and for the moment, that felt like enough. Maya's last weeks in San Francisco passed quickly, filled with packing and preparations and farewell gatherings that felt different from any family events she had experienced before. For the first time, she was the center of positive attention, the family member whose future everyone wanted to discuss and celebrate.
It was intoxicating and slightly uncomfortable,
a reminder of how much she had craved this recognition while simultaneously revealing how little it mattered now that she finally had it. The night before her departure, Maya was in her childhood bedroom, packing the last of her belongings, when Vivian appeared in the doorway holding a small wrapped package. "I wanted to give you this before you left," she said, stepping into the room with obvious hesitation. Maya unwrapped the package to reveal a pair of vintage Chanel shoes, black leather with a modest heel and the kind of timeless elegance that never went out of style. "They were my grandmother's," Vivian explained, referring to their great-grandmother on their mother's side, who had died when they were children. "I found them in my mom's closet and asked if I could have them. I thought you should take them to New York. For good luck." Maya turned the shoes over in her hands, examining the craftsmanship and imagining the woman who had once worn them. Their great-grandmother had been a seamstress who immigrated from China in the 1940s, working in the garment district of San Francisco to build a life for her family. Maya had heard stories about her skill and determination, but she had never seen any of her work or possessions. "Are you sure?" Maya asked, looking up at her cousin. "These must be worth a lot, and they have so much history." "That's exactly why you should have them," Vivian replied. "You're the one carrying on her legacy, continuing her work in your own way. It feels right." Maya felt tears gathering in her eyes as she held the shoes, understanding the significance of this gesture in ways that went beyond their monetary value. Vivian was giving her something precious and irreplaceable, a family heirloom that connected her to the woman's path she was following in her own contemporary way. "Thank you," Maya said, and meant it completely. "I'll think of both of you every time I wear them." Vivian smiled, and for the first time in years, the expression looked genuine rather than performative. "I hope New York is everything you want it to be. I hope you find what you're looking for here." They hugged then, awkwardly but sincerely, two women who were finally beginning to see each other clearly after years of viewing their relationship through the distorted lens of family expectations and childhood wounds. Maya left for New York the next morning, carrying 2 suitcases, a portfolio of her best work, and a pair of vintage shoes that connected her to a legacy of women who had used their talents to build better lives for themselves and their families. As the plane lifted off from San Francisco International Airport, she looked down at the city that had shaped her and felt neither regret nor nostalgia, only anticipation for the future she was finally free to create on her own terms. The Marchesa position proved to be everything Maya had hoped for and more challenging than she had imagined. Working for one of the fashion industry's most demanding houses required skills that went beyond design talent, encompassing diplomacy, strategic thinking, and the ability to execute someone else's vision while subtly incorporating her own aesthetic sensibilities. She found herself working 16-hour days and loving every exhausting minute of it, finally understanding what it felt like to be valued for her contributions rather than tolerated for her competence. Her relationship with Vivian evolved slowly, through text messages and occasional phone calls. Her cousin had ended things with Jonathan, whose family had apparently been less impressed with her social connections than she had hoped. She was now working at a nonprofit arts organization, using her communication skills to help young artists find funding and exhibition opportunities. It was work that seemed to genuinely engage her, and Maya could hear a new kind of satisfaction in Vivian's voice when she talked about her projects and the artists she was helping. 6 months after Maya's move to New York, Vivian called with unexpected news. She was planning to visit the city for a conference and wondered if Maya would be free for dinner. They met at a small Italian restaurant in Soho, and Maya was struck by how different her cousin looked. Vivian's hair was shorter, her clothes more understated, and there was a groundedness to her demeanor that replaced the restless energy Maya remembered from their childhood. "You look happy," Maya observed as they settled into their seats. "I am," Vivian replied, and the simplicity of the statement carried more weight than any elaborate explanation could have provided. "Different than I expected, but happy." Over dinner, they talked about their work, their families, and the ways their perspectives had shifted over the past months. Vivian described her efforts to understand the patterns that had governed her relationships, working with a therapist to address what she called her chronic need for external validation. Maya shared her own struggles with imposter syndrome and the pressure to prove herself worthy of the opportunities she had been given. "I keep waiting for someone to figure out that I don't belong here,"
Like they'll realize they made a mistake hiring the girl from San Francisco who learned to sew from YouTube videos. You know that's ridiculous, right? Vivian said, with surprising firmness. You're there because you're talented, not because of some cosmic accident. The dress that got you noticed wasn't a fluke. It was the result of years of work and skill development. Maya looked at her cousin with new appreciation, recognizing the effort it must have taken for Vivian to offer reassurance that centered Maya's achievements rather than her own insecurities. "Thank you," Maya said. "I needed to hear that. We're good at supporting each other when we're not competing. Maybe we should have figured that out sooner."
I kept the dress. Maya felt a flash of the old anger before realizing that it had lost its power over her. What do you mean? I mean, I didn't give it back after the gala. I told everyone I did, but I kept it. I've had it hanging in my closet for months, and I don't know why. Maya studied her cousin's face, trying to understand this confession and what it meant for their fragile new understanding. "Do you want it back?" Vivian asked. "I could ship it to you or bring it next time I visit." Maya considered the question carefully, thinking about the woman she had been when she created that dress and the woman she was becoming in its absence. The dress had served its purpose, launching her career and teaching her family to see her differently, but it belonged to a version of herself that she was still outgrowing. "Keep it," she said finally, "but wear it. Don't let it hang in your closet like some kind of trophy. If you're going to have it, use it." Vivian nodded, understanding the condition being placed on this unexpected gift. "I will. Thank you." They hugged goodbye, and Maya watched her cousin disappear into the subway entrance before turning toward her building. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she thought about the vintage shoes waiting in her closet, the ones that connected her to their great-grandmother's legacy of building something meaningful through skill and determination. Tomorrow she would wear those shoes to work, carrying forward a tradition that had nothing to do with competition or comparison, only with the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and useful in the world. The story of the stolen dress had become something else entirely. A cautionary tale about the price of family dysfunction, a reminder that the things we think we want are rarely the things we actually need, and ultimately a testament to the possibility of choosing different patterns when the old ones no longer serve us. Maya had learned that success stolen never tastes as sweet as success earned, but she had also learned that sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most painful experiences. In the months that followed, Maya and Vivian continued to rebuild their relationship, slowly and carefully, like archaeologists reconstructing something precious from fragments. They discovered that they genuinely enjoyed each other's company when they weren't performing for their family's attention, that they shared a similar sense of humor and compatible values, that they could be allies rather than adversaries if they chose to abandon the roles they had inherited. The dress became a symbol of this transformation, no longer a source of conflict, but a reminder of how far they had traveled from the women they used to be. Vivian did wear it to important events where she wanted to feel confident and beautiful, and each time she did, she thought of her cousin's talent and generosity. Maya went on to design dresses that were featured in magazines and worn by celebrities, but she always remembered the one that taught her the difference between taking what belongs to someone else and creating something that belongs entirely to yourself. Years later, when Maya had established her own fashion house and Vivian had become the director of her nonprofit organization, they would tell the story to young women who struggled with similar family dynamics and competitive relationships. They would emphasize that healing doesn't always look like forgiveness, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in patterns that diminish everyone involved, and that the courage to claim your own worth often requires disappointing people who have become comfortable with your sacrifice. The shoes continued to serve as Maya's talisman, connecting her to a heritage of women who had used their skills to build better lives for themselves and their daughters. She wore them to every important milestone: her first Fashion Week show, the opening of her boutique, the day she was featured on the cover of Vogue. Each time, she thought of her great-grandmother working long hours in San Francisco's garment district, and of Vivian's generosity in recognizing that some inheritances should go to the person who can best honor their original purpose. The story that began with betrayal and revenge had become something else entirely, a meditation on the price of family harmony, the value of creative integrity, and the possibility of choosing love over competition, even in the most challenging circumstances. Maya learned that you don't always get to choose the family patterns you inherit,
but you do get to choose whether you perpetuate them or transform them into something healthier for the next generation. 3 years had passed since Maya established her boutique in Manhattan's Lower East Side, and the space had evolved from a modest storefront with a single seamstress into a thriving atelier that employed 12 people and attracted clients from across the fashion industry. The morning light streamed through the large windows as Maya examined the latest sketches from her design team, each drawing representing hours of careful consideration and refinement that would eventually transform into the kind of garments that made women feel both powerful and beautiful. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vivian, who had become Maya's unofficial West Coast representative, scouting potential clients and maintaining relationships with the San Francisco social scene that had once seemed so important to them both. The message contained a photo of a newspaper clipping from the San Francisco Chronicle's Society page, featuring a familiar figure in an elegant navy dress at a museum fundraiser. Maya recognized the dress immediately as one of her own designs, created for a tech executive's wife who had discovered Maya's work through a mutual friend in New York. The caption identified the woman as Elena Rodriguez, founder of a sustainable fashion initiative that was gaining national attention for its innovative approach to ethical manufacturing. Below the photo, Vivian had written a simple message that made Maya smile. "Your work is everywhere now. Mom saw this and finally understands what you've been building." Maya set down her phone and returned her attention to the sketches spread across her drafting table, but her mind wandered to the conversation she had planned for later that afternoon. Rebecca Sterling, editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar, had requested a meeting to discuss what she had described as a significant opportunity for collaboration. Maya had learned to approach such meetings with cautious optimism, understanding that the fashion industry was filled with promises that materialized into nothing and casual conversations that unexpectedly changed the trajectory of entire careers. The boutique operated on a different rhythm than the large fashion houses where Maya had learned her craft. Here, every client received personal attention. Every garment was constructed with meticulous care, and every decision reflected Maya's commitment to creating pieces that would endure both stylistically and structurally for decades rather than seasons. It was an approach that had attracted a devoted clientele willing to invest in quality, but it also meant that growth came slowly, and each new opportunity required careful consideration of how it would affect the intimate culture she had worked so hard to establish.
Maya had learned to appreciate these ordinary moments, understanding that they formed the foundation upon which more dramatic developments could be built. Each satisfied client became an ambassador for her work. Each perfectly executed detail contributed to the reputation that had allowed her business to thrive in one of the world's most competitive markets. At precisely 2 o'clock, Rebecca Sterling arrived at the boutique, accompanied by a woman Maya didn't immediately recognize, but whose presence suggested both wealth and influence. She was perhaps 50 years old, with silver hair styled in a way that complemented rather than concealed her age, and she moved through the space with the confident ease of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room she entered. Rebecca made the introductions with her characteristic efficiency. "Maya, I'd like you to meet Catherine Morrison. Catherine is the founder and CEO of Morrison Industries, and she has a proposition that I think will interest you." Maya recognized the name immediately. Morrison Industries was a multinational corporation with interests in everything from renewable energy to luxury goods. And Catherine Morrison was known for her commitment to sustainable business practices and her support of emerging designers. She had been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine the previous year, profiled as one of the business leaders reshaping corporate responsibility for the 21st century. "Ms. Chen," Catherine said, extending her hand with a firm grip that conveyed both warmth and authority, "Rebecca has been telling me about your work, and I must say, what I see here confirms everything she's shared. You've created something truly special." They settled into the consultation area that Maya had designed to feel more like an elegant living room than a traditional retail space, with comfortable seating arranged around a low table where fabric samples and sketches could be displayed naturally. Catherine's attention moved systematically around the room, taking in the carefully curated selection of completed garments that represented the range and evolution of Maya's aesthetic vision. "I'll be direct," Catherine began once they were seated.
I'm in the process of launching a new division of Morrison Industries focused exclusively on sustainable luxury fashion. We're looking for a design partner who shares our commitment to ethical manufacturing and environmental responsibility, someone who can help us create a line that proves sustainability and luxury aren't mutually exclusive concepts. Maya felt her pulse quicken as she processed the implications of what Catherine was proposing. A partnership with Morrison Industries would provide access to resources and markets that she could never reach independently. But it would also mean surrendering some of the control that had been essential to maintaining the integrity of her work. What exactly would this partnership look like? Maya asked, keeping her voice steady despite the magnitude of the opportunity being presented. Rebecca leaned forward, clearly having anticipated this question. Catherine is offering something unprecedented in the fashion industry. Complete creative control for you, unlimited budget for materials and construction, access to Morrison's global manufacturing network, and a marketing campaign that would introduce your designs to international markets. In exchange, Morrison Industries would hold the licensing rights for the collaboration line, with you receiving both a substantial upfront payment and ongoing royalties. The financial terms are certainly generous, Catherine added, but more importantly, this partnership would allow you to demonstrate that ethical fashion can compete at the highest levels of the luxury market. We're not talking about compromise or cost-cutting. We're talking about setting a new standard for what's possible when sustainability and craftsmanship work together. Maya found herself thinking about the conversation she had been having with Vivian about the future of fashion and their shared conviction that the industry needed to evolve beyond its traditional model of planned obsolescence and exploitative labor practices. This partnership could provide the platform to implement those ideals on a scale that would influence the entire market. I'd need to understand more about the manufacturing process, Maya said carefully. My reputation depends on the quality of construction, and I won't compromise that for any partnership, regardless of the financial incentives. Catherine smiled, and Maya could see that this response had been anticipated and appreciated. I was hoping you'd say that. Would you be available to visit our facilities next week? We have operations in several countries, but I'd like to start with our textile mill in North Carolina and our assembly facility in Vermont. You can see firsthand how we're implementing sustainable practices without sacrificing quality. The meeting continued for another hour, covering details about timelines, design parameters, and the complex logistics of launching a new line in the global luxury market. Maya asked probing questions about labor conditions, environmental impact, and the long-term vision for the partnership, gradually building confidence that Catherine's commitment to sustainability was genuine rather than merely a marketing strategy. As Rebecca and Catherine prepared to leave, Maya realized that she was being offered the kind of opportunity that most designers could only dream about. Yet something in her hesitated, a voice that whispered warnings about the seductive nature of unlimited resources and the ways that good intentions could be corrupted by commercial pressures. "How long do I have to make a decision?" Maya asked as they stood near the boutique's entrance. "Take whatever time you need," Catherine replied. "This partnership will only work if you're completely committed to the vision. I'd rather wait for your enthusiastic participation than proceed with your reluctant agreement." After they left, Maya found herself alone in the boutique with Lauren, who had been discreetly managing other business during the meeting, but whose curiosity was evident in her carefully composed expression. "That sounded significant," Lauren said, beginning to organize the fabric samples that had been displayed during the consultation. "It could change everything," Maya admitted, though she wasn't certain whether this prospect excited her or terrified her. That evening, Maya called Vivian to discuss the proposal, needing the perspective of someone who understood both her ambitions and her fears. Vivian listened carefully as Maya described the meeting and the scope of what Catherine Morrison was offering, asking thoughtful questions that helped clarify the potential benefits and risks of such a partnership. "It sounds like exactly what you've been working toward," Vivian said when Maya had finished explaining the details. "A chance to prove that your approach can work at scale, that you don't have to choose between ethics and success." "But what if it changes who I am as a designer?" Maya asked, voicing the concern that had been growing since the meeting ended. "What if access to unlimited resources makes me careless about the details that have always defined my work?" Vivian was quiet for a moment before responding.
Remember when you were worried about joining Marchesa? You thought working for someone else would compromise your vision, but instead it taught you skills that made your independent work stronger. Maybe this partnership would do the same thing on a larger scale. This feels different, though. More consequential. Of course it does. You're not the same person who was afraid to ask for what she deserved. You're someone who built a successful business by staying true to your values. Trust that version of yourself to navigate whatever comes next. The conversation continued past midnight, ranging from practical considerations about managing the partnership to philosophical questions about the responsibility that comes with influence in the fashion industry. Vivian shared her own experiences with scaling her nonprofit organization, describing the challenges of maintaining organizational culture while expanding programs, and the importance of establishing clear boundaries from the beginning of any collaborative relationship. By the time they ended the call, Maya felt clearer about the decision she needed to make. The partnership with Morrison Industries represented an opportunity to amplify her impact without necessarily compromising her principles. But success would depend on her ability to maintain the discipline and attention to detail that had brought her to this point. Over the following week, Maya visited the Morrison Industries facilities that Catherine had mentioned, accompanied by her head seamstress, Patricia, whose expertise in construction techniques made her an invaluable judge of manufacturing quality. The North Carolina textile mill impressed them both with its innovative approach to sustainable fiber production and its commitment to fair labor practices. Workers seemed genuinely satisfied with their employment conditions, and the quality of the textiles being produced met the standards that Maya demanded for her boutique clients. The Vermont assembly facility proved equally impressive, with skilled craftspeople who understood the nuances of luxury construction and supervisors who prioritized quality over speed. Maya spent hours in conversation with the facility manager, discussing everything from quality control protocols to worker training programs, gradually building confidence that a partnership with Morrison Industries wouldn't require her to sacrifice the values that had guided her career. During the flight back to New York, Maya made her decision. She would accept Catherine's proposal, but with specific conditions that would preserve her creative independence and ensure that the collaboration line met the same standards as her boutique work. The partnership would be structured as a limited engagement, creating a single collection that would serve as a proof of concept for future collaborations. The announcement of the Maya Chen x Morrison Industries partnership generated immediate attention from fashion media, with coverage that emphasized both the unprecedented nature of the collaboration and its potential to influence industry practices around sustainability and ethical manufacturing. Maya found herself fielding interview requests from publications that had never previously shown interest in her work, a reminder of how partnership with a major corporation could amplify even the most carefully cultivated independent reputation. The design process for the collaboration line began with a 3-month period of intensive research and development, during which Maya worked closely with Morrison's sustainability team to identify materials and techniques that would meet both her aesthetic standards and the company's environmental goals. This phase required a level of scientific rigor that Maya had never previously applied to her work, involving detailed analysis from water usage in fabric production to the carbon footprint of international shipping. Maya established a temporary design studio at the Vermont facility, splitting her time between New York and the manufacturing location to ensure that every aspect of production met her specifications. She brought Lauren with her as a liaison between the collaboration project and the ongoing operations of the boutique, a decision that proved essential as orders for her independent work continued to arrive at their usual pace. The experience of working with unlimited resources proved both liberating and challenging in ways that Maya hadn't anticipated. Access to the finest materials and most skilled craftspeople allowed her to explore design concepts that would have been financially impossible in her boutique, but the scale of the operation also required new skills in project management and team coordination that stretched her abilities in unexpected directions. 3 months into the development process, Maya received an unexpected call from her grandmother, who rarely initiated phone conversations and whose formal tone suggested that this communication had been carefully considered before being placed. Maya, her grandmother began in Mandarin, using the childhood name that Maya hadn't heard in several years. I have been reading about your business in the Chinese newspapers here.
Mrs. Wu from the temple showed me an article that mentioned your work with the big company. Maya felt a familiar tightness in her chest as she prepared for whatever critique or concern her grandmother was preparing to deliver. Despite the success of her business and the recognition she had received in the fashion industry, she still felt like a child seeking approval when speaking with the matriarch of their family. The article said you are teaching American companies how to make clothes the right way, like your great-grandmother did when she came to this country. I wanted to tell you that she would be proud of what you are building. The unexpected praise left Maya momentarily speechless, understanding that this acknowledgement represented a significant shift in how her family viewed her career. For years, her work had been treated as an interesting hobby that happened to generate income, but her grandmother's words suggested recognition that Maya was carrying forward a tradition that had deeper significance than mere commercial success. "Thank you, Nai," she replied, using the Mandarin term for grandmother that felt more appropriate for this conversation than its English equivalent. "I think about her every day when I'm working." "Your cousin called me last week," she said, transitioning to a topic that Maya knew would be more complicated. "She told me about the man she is planning to marry. She says you have met him and approve." Maya smiled, remembering her recent video call with Vivian, who had introduced her to David Park, the nonprofit administrator she had been dating for several months. He was a thoughtful man who seemed to genuinely appreciate Vivian's intelligence and ambition, and their relationship appeared to be built on mutual respect rather than the competitive dynamics that had characterized her cousin's previous romantic involvements. "I like him very much. He makes Vivian happy in a way that seems healthy and sustainable. She wants to have the wedding here in San Francisco, a traditional ceremony but also modern. She asked if you would design her dress." The request hung in the air between them, loaded with all the history and complexity that had defined Maya and Vivian's relationship. Maya understood that this was an opportunity for healing that went beyond their previous conversations and agreements, a chance to transform their shared past into something that could strengthen rather than divide their family. "I would be honored to design her dress," she said, meaning it completely. The conversation continued for another few minutes, touching on family news and Maya's upcoming visit to San Francisco for the holidays. But the significant communication had been completed. Maya's grandmother had acknowledged her work as meaningful, and Vivian had offered her the ultimate gesture of trust and reconciliation by asking her to create the dress for the most important day of her life. When Maya shared this news with Catherine Morrison during their weekly check-in call, the older woman immediately understood the significance of what Maya was describing.
Family relationships in the fashion industry can be particularly complex, Catherine observed. There's something about creating beauty that makes people feel entitled to claim ownership of your talent, and it sounds like you and your cousin have found a way to move beyond that dynamic. "It's taken years," Maya admitted, "and it required both of us to change in ways that weren't always comfortable. The best transformations usually do. Speaking of which, I have some news about our collaboration that I think you'll find interesting." Catherine went on to explain that advance orders for the Maya Chen x Morrison Industries collection had exceeded all projections, with major retailers expressing interest in carrying the line and fashion editors requesting exclusive previews of the designs. The success was gratifying, but it also meant that decisions about future collaborations would need to be made sooner than originally planned. "I'd like to propose expanding our partnership," Catherine said. "Not just additional collections, but a permanent position for you as creative director of Morrison's fashion division. You would have complete autonomy over design decisions and the budget to build a team that shares your vision for sustainable luxury." Maya felt the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that accompanied major career opportunities. But this time, the sensation was tempered by confidence in her ability to evaluate the proposal objectively. She had learned to distinguish between opportunities that would advance her goals and those that would simply advance her visibility, understanding that the two weren't always synonymous. "I'll need to think about it," Maya replied. "The collaboration has been successful because it was finite and focused. A permanent position would require different commitments and probably different compromises. Of course, take whatever time you need, but I hope you'll consider that your influence on the industry could be exponentially greater if you had the resources to implement your vision at scale."
After ending the call, Maya found herself walking through her boutique, examining the garments and sketches that represented years of careful work and gradual growth. The space felt different now that she was contemplating the possibility of fundamental change, not because anything physical had altered, but because her perspective on what she had built was shifting. Lauren appeared at her side carrying the afternoon mail and wearing an expression that suggested she had been monitoring Maya's phone conversation from a respectful distance. "Big decisions?" Lauren asked, sorting through the letters and packages with practiced efficiency. "The biggest," Maya confirmed. "Catherine Morrison wants to make our partnership permanent. Complete creative control, unlimited budget, global distribution." That sounds like exactly what any designer would want. "That's what makes it complicated. I built this business because I wanted to create beautiful things on my own terms. A permanent partnership would give me more resources, but it would also mean that my terms become someone else's terms, even if they promise complete autonomy." Lauren nodded thoughtfully, understanding the complexity of what Maya was grappling with. "What does your instinct tell you?" Maya considered the question carefully, trying to separate her rational analysis of the opportunity from her emotional attachment to the independence she had worked so hard to achieve. "My instinct tells me that Catherine Morrison is offering me a chance to influence the fashion industry in ways that I could never accomplish independently. But it also tells me that once I accept that level of responsibility, I can never go back to being just a boutique designer who creates beautiful dresses for discerning clients." "Is that necessarily a bad thing?" "No, but it's a permanent thing. And I've learned to be very careful about permanent decisions." That evening, Maya called her parents to discuss the opportunity and seek their perspective on what it might mean for her future. Her father, ever practical, immediately began asking questions about financial terms and legal protections, while her mother wanted to understand how the partnership would affect Maya's ability to maintain relationships with her current clients. "Your mother and I are proud of what you've built," her father said when they had finished analyzing the practical aspects of Catherine's proposal. "But we're also aware that you've always been driven by something more than just professional success. What does this opportunity offer that you can't achieve on your own?" "Scale," Maya replied immediately. "The ability to demonstrate that sustainable practices can work in luxury fashion, not just as a niche market, but as a standard for the entire industry." "And what would you have to give up to achieve that scale?" Maya paused, recognizing that her father had identified the essential question she had been avoiding. "Control, probably. The ability to make every decision based purely on what I think is right, rather than what's commercially viable." "Those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive," her mother observed. "You've proven that ethical practices can be commercially successful. Maybe this partnership would give you the platform to prove it on a larger scale." The conversation continued for over an hour, covering everything from Maya's long-term career goals to her responsibility to use her influence for positive change in the industry. By the time they ended the call, Maya felt clearer about the factors that would ultimately drive her decision, even if she wasn't yet ready to make that choice. The following week brought the official launch of the Maya Chen x Morrison Industries collection at a private event in Morrison's Manhattan showroom. The space had been transformed into an elegant gallery where each piece could be displayed as both functional clothing and artistic expression, with subtle lighting that emphasized the intricate construction details that Maya had insisted upon throughout the development process. The guest list included fashion editors, sustainable business advocates, and influential clients who represented the market that Catherine hoped to reach with the collaboration. Maya moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and answering questions about her design process, while observing how people responded to the fusion of luxury aesthetics and environmental responsibility that the collection represented.
Vivian had flown in from San Francisco for the launch, accompanied by David, who was experiencing his first exposure to the high-stakes world of fashion industry events. Maya watched with amusement as her cousin guided him through the social dynamics of the evening, explaining the significance of various attendees and helping him navigate conversations with people whose influence extended far beyond their immediate appearances. "This is incredible," Vivian said when she finally had a private moment with Maya near the end of the evening.
I mean, I knew your work was beautiful, but seeing it presented like this, understanding the impact it could have on how people think about sustainable fashion, it's inspiring. It's also terrifying, Maya admitted. Catherine wants to make this permanent, to expand the partnership into something much larger than a single collection. What's terrifying about that? Maya gestured around the showroom where the last guests were examining the displayed garments with the kind of reverent attention usually reserved for museum pieces. All of this exists because I was willing to compromise, to work within someone else's framework instead of insisting on my own approach. What if the next compromise is one step too far? What if I lose sight of what made my work meaningful in the first place? Vivian studied her cousin's face, recognizing the anxiety that lay beneath her professional composure. You know, when I was planning my nonprofit, I had a mentor who told me something that I've never forgotten. She said that growth always requires risk, but stagnation guarantees irrelevance. Maybe the question isn't whether this partnership will change you, but whether it will change you in ways that align with your values. How do I know that ahead of time? You don't, but you trust yourself to recognize when you're moving away from your values and to make corrections when necessary. You've already proven you can do that. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Maya found herself alone with Catherine Morrison in the showroom, surrounded by the garments that represented months of collaborative effort and countless decisions about balancing artistic vision with commercial viability. "So," Catherine said, settling into one of the chairs that had been arranged for the evening's presentations, "what did you think of tonight?" "I think we created something beautiful that could influence how people understand sustainable fashion," Maya replied honestly. "But I also think we're at a crossroads where we need to decide what we want this partnership to become." Catherine nodded, clearly having anticipated this conversation. "You're concerned about maintaining your independence. I'm concerned about maintaining my integrity. Independence is just one aspect of that. Tell me what you need to feel confident that a permanent partnership would support rather than compromise your integrity." Maya had been thinking about this question for weeks, and she found that the answer came easily once she was asked directly. "I need to know that decisions about design and manufacturing will always prioritize quality and sustainability over profit margins. I need guarantees that workers throughout the supply chain will be treated fairly and paid living wages, and I need the freedom to walk away if those commitments aren't honored." "Done," Catherine said without hesitation. "Anything else?" "I want a clause in the contract that requires Morrison Industries to donate a percentage of profits from our collaboration to organizations that support garment workers' rights internationally, and I want that percentage to increase as our sales increase." Catherine smiled, clearly appreciating Maya's approach to the negotiation. "You're not just thinking about yourself in this partnership. I can't. Once my name is associated with Morrison Industries at this level, I become responsible for every aspect of how business is conducted. That's a responsibility I take seriously." "Which is exactly why this partnership will work," Catherine replied. "You understand that success in the modern marketplace requires alignment between values and actions, not just marketing messages that sound appealing." They spent the next hour outlining the terms that would govern an expanded partnership, covering everything from creative control to profit sharing to the mechanisms for resolving disputes that might arise as their collaboration evolved. Maya found herself impressed by Catherine's willingness to accommodate her requirements, understanding that the older woman's experience in building sustainable businesses had taught her that protecting core values was essential to long-term success. By the time they concluded their discussion, Maya felt confident that a permanent partnership with Morrison Industries could advance her goals without compromising her principles. The decision still required careful consideration and detailed contract negotiations, but the fundamental questions had been resolved to her satisfaction. 2 weeks later, Maya signed the agreement that would make her the creative director of Morrison Industries' fashion division, with authority over all design decisions and budget allocations for a new line that would be positioned as the company's flagship offering in the luxury market. The announcement generated significant media attention, with coverage that emphasized both the innovative nature of the partnership and its potential to influence industry practices around sustainability and worker rights. The expanded partnership required Maya to relocate her primary operations to Morrison's design campus in Vermont while maintaining her New York boutique as a showcase for limited edition pieces and custom work. Lauren agreed to manage the boutique's day-to-day operations, allowing Maya to focus on the larger project of building a fashion line that could compete with established luxury brands while meeting higher standards for environmental and social responsibility. As Maya prepared for this transition, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a young woman whose dreams were constantly undermined by family dynamics to a designer whose work was being recognized as a model for the future of sustainable fashion. The path had been neither linear nor predictable, marked by betrayals and reconciliations, compromises and breakthroughs, moments of doubt and periods of clarity that had gradually accumulated into something approaching wisdom. The vintage shoes that Vivian had given her before her move to New York now occupied a place of honor in her new Vermont studio, serving as a daily reminder of the heritage she carried forward and the relationships that had shaped her understanding of both creative work and personal responsibility. Each time she looked at them, Maya thought about her great-grandmother's determination to build something meaningful through skill and dedication, and about her own opportunity to continue that tradition in ways that would influence not just her own success, but the practices of an entire industry. The story that had begun with a stolen dress and a desperate desire for recognition had evolved into something far more complex and ultimately more satisfying than anything Maya had imagined when she first decided to use her talent as a weapon in the ongoing competition with her cousin. She had learned that the most meaningful victories come not from defeating others, but from creating something valuable that didn't exist before, and that true success is measured not just by personal achievement, but the positive impact one's work has on the world. As Maya looked toward the future, she understood that her partnership with Morrison Industries was just the beginning of a larger project of demonstrating that business success and social responsibility weren't competing priorities, but complementary aspects of a sustainable approach to creating value in the modern economy.
The dress that Vivian had taken years earlier had become the catalyst for a career that would influence how people thought about fashion, sustainability, and the responsibility that comes with creative talent. The irony wasn't lost on Maya that her greatest professional achievement had grown from what had initially felt like her most devastating personal betrayal. But she had learned that the most valuable lessons often come disguised as the most painful experiences, and that transformation is possible even in relationships and situations that initially seem beyond repair. 5 months into her tenure as creative director of Morrison Industries' fashion division, Maya found herself standing in her Vermont studio at 4 a.m, surrounded by sketches and fabric samples for what would become the most personally significant design of her career. Vivian's wedding dress lay spread across 3 drafting tables, each section representing weeks of careful consideration and meticulous construction that would culminate in a garment worthy of the transformation their relationship had undergone. The dress itself was a study in understated elegance, featuring hand-painted silk that Maya had commissioned from an artisan in Lyon who specialized in techniques that hadn't been widely used since the 1920s. The design incorporated elements that spoke to both Vivian's personality and the cultural traditions of their family, with subtle beadwork that referenced the embroidery patterns their great-grandmother had learned in Guangzhou, and sleeves that could be removed to transform the formal ceremony gown into something more suitable for dancing at the reception. Maya had been working on the dress for 3 months, stealing hours between her Morrison Industries responsibilities and her ongoing boutique projects to ensure that every detail met the standards she demanded for her most important commissions. The process had become a meditation on the nature of forgiveness and the possibility of transforming painful history into something beautiful and meaningful. Her phone buzzed with a text from David Park, who had proven to be an unexpectedly valuable addition to their extended family dynamics. His message was characteristically thoughtful and precise. Vivian is trying not to seem nervous about the final fitting, but she's been reorganizing her jewelry box for the 3rd time this week. How are you feeling about everything? Maya smiled as she typed her response, appreciating David's ability to read Vivian's emotional state with the kind of accuracy that came from genuine attention and care. The dress is ready. Whether I'm ready is a different question entirely. It was true that the technical aspects of the dress had been completed to Maya's satisfaction, but the emotional weight of what the garment represented continued to evolve as the wedding date approached. This wasn't simply a commission from a client who appreciated her aesthetic vision. It was a tangible symbol of the healing that had taken place between 2 women who had spent most of their lives viewing each other as competitors rather than allies.
The early morning hours in the studio had become Maya's most productive time, when the demands of managing a fashion division and the constant stream of meetings and decisions could be set aside in favor of the meditative rhythm of hand sewing and the careful consideration of how light would move across carefully chosen fabrics. These quiet moments reminded her why she had been drawn to fashion design in the first place, before career ambitions and industry recognition had complicated her relationship with the creative process. Lauren arrived at the studio just after 6, carrying coffee and the kind of organized efficiency that had made her indispensable as Maya's operations expanded beyond what one person could reasonably manage. She had adapted seamlessly to the increased complexity of coordinating between the Morrison Industries facilities and the New York boutique, developing systems that ensured neither operation suffered from divided attention. The Morrison board meeting is at 10, Lauren said, consulting her tablet while examining the progress on Vivian's dress. Catherine wants to review the preliminary sales figures for the spring collection, and the sustainability team has questions about the new manufacturing protocols you proposed. Maya nodded, mentally shifting from the intimate focus required for custom work to the broader strategic thinking that her corporate responsibilities demanded. The transition between these different aspects of her career had become smoother with practice, but it still required conscious effort to maintain the attention to detail that had built her reputation, while also considering the larger implications of decisions that would affect hundreds of workers and thousands of customers. "How are the boutique orders looking for next month?" Maya asked, beginning to organize her workspace for the day ahead. "Fully booked through the end of the year. I've had to start a waiting list for custom work, which feels surreal but also exciting. The Morrison partnership has definitely raised your profile in ways that are translating into increased demand for the boutique pieces." This was exactly the kind of positive feedback loop that Maya had hoped would result from her expanded partnership with Morrison Industries. Rather than cannibalizing her independent work, the corporate collaboration had enhanced her reputation in ways that benefited all aspects of her business. The challenge now was managing growth in a way that preserved the quality and personal attention that had always distinguished her work from mass-market alternatives. The board meeting proceeded smoothly, with Catherine Morrison presenting sales figures that exceeded all projections and highlighting media coverage that positioned the collaboration as a model for how luxury brands could incorporate sustainable practices without compromising their market position. Maya contributed insights about customer feedback and manufacturing improvements, gradually building confidence in her ability to operate effectively in corporate environments while maintaining her commitment to ethical practices. During the lunch break, Maya received a call from her mother, who had been following the business coverage of the Morrison partnership with the kind of pride that had been conspicuously absent during Maya's earlier career struggles. "Your father and I saw the article in the Wall Street Journal," Susan said, her voice carrying warmth that felt both familiar and newly appreciative. "They called you a visionary leader in sustainable fashion. We wanted you to know how proud we are of what you've accomplished." Maya felt the complex mixture of gratification and sadness that often accompanied belated parental recognition. Understanding that her parents' appreciation was genuine, while also recognizing how much their earlier support might have meant during the years when she was building her reputation without institutional backing. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot to me." "We also wanted to talk to you about the wedding," Susan continued, transitioning to the topic that had dominated family conversations for months. "Vivian showed us pictures of the dress, and it's absolutely stunning. I don't think I fully understood your talent until I saw what you created for her." The admission hung between them, loaded with years of family dynamics that were finally being acknowledged and examined. Maya appreciated her mother's honesty, while also recognizing that this conversation represented a kind of healing that would have been impossible before her professional success provided a framework for understanding her worth. "The dress was important to me," Maya said carefully, "not just as a design project, but as a way of showing Vivian and our family that I could create something beautiful for her instead of just competing with her. I think we all learned something from how you handled that situation, about the difference between supporting each other and enabling unhealthy competition." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, covering wedding logistics and family dynamics with a frankness that felt both overdue and genuinely constructive. By the time they ended the call, Maya felt that her relationship with her parents had reached a new level of mutual respect that would influence their interactions going forward. That afternoon, Maya drove to her grandmother's house in San Francisco for what had become a monthly tradition since establishing her Vermont operations. These visits served multiple purposes: maintaining connections with family members who had supported her throughout her career, staying current with West Coast fashion trends and client preferences, and ensuring that her business expansion didn't completely disconnect her from the cultural roots that continued to influence her aesthetic sensibilities. Her grandmother's house had changed little over the years, still filled with the careful accumulation of beautiful objects that reflected both Chinese traditions and American adaptations. Maya found her grandmother in the garden, tending to the vegetables and flowers that had provided both practical sustenance and aesthetic pleasure for decades. "Maya," her grandmother said in Mandarin, setting down her gardening tools and embracing her granddaughter with the kind of physical affection that had become more common since Maya's business success had validated her choices in ways that previous achievements had not accomplished. "I have been thinking about the wedding dress you made for Vivian."
They settled onto the bench that Maya's grandfather had built shortly after they purchased the house in the 1960s, overlooking the garden that had evolved through seasons and decades while maintaining its essential character and purpose. "The dress is beautiful," her grandmother continued, "but more important is what it represents about how you and Vivian have changed your relationship with each other." Maya nodded, understanding that her grandmother was offering perspective that came from decades of observing family dynamics and the ways that grudges and competitions could poison relationships across generations. "When your cousin took your dress all those years ago," her grandmother said, "I was angry with her, but also worried about you. Not because of the dress itself, but because I could see how much anger you were carrying and how it might affect your happiness." "I was angry for a long time," Maya admitted, "longer than I should have been. Anger can be useful when it motivates you to work harder and achieve more, but it becomes destructive when it prevents you from recognizing opportunities for healing and connection." Maya thought about the years of therapy and difficult conversations that had been necessary to transform her relationship with Vivian from competition to collaboration, understanding that this process had required changes from both of them that went beyond surface-level politeness. "Creating something beautiful for Vivian's wedding shows that you have learned the difference between justice and revenge," her grandmother continued. "Justice restores balance and creates opportunities for everyone to flourish. Revenge only continues cycles of harm." The wisdom of this observation resonated with Maya's own experiences, particularly her recognition that using her stolen dress to launch her career had been satisfying, but hadn't addressed the underlying family dynamics that had created the competition between her and Vivian in the first place. "I think the dress helped both of us understand that we could support each other's success instead of viewing it as a threat," Maya said. "That understanding will be important as you both continue to build your lives and careers. Success is more meaningful when it can be shared with family who genuinely celebrate your achievements." They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing wedding preparations and family traditions, with Maya's grandmother sharing stories about her own marriage ceremony in 1952 and the ways that cultural expectations had evolved over the decades. These conversations provided Maya with historical context that influenced her understanding of how personal choices intersected with broader social changes. That evening, Maya met Vivian and David for dinner at a restaurant in Chinatown that had been serving their family for 3 generations. The conversation flowed easily between wedding logistics and career updates, with none of the underlying tension that had characterized their interactions for most of their lives. "I have something to tell you both," Vivian said, as they finished their main course, her tone suggesting news that had been carefully considered before being shared. "David and I have decided to start a foundation focused on supporting emerging artists and designers from underrepresented communities."
Maya felt genuine excitement at this announcement, recognizing that such a project would allow Vivian to use her networking skills and nonprofit experience in ways that could create meaningful opportunities for people who faced barriers similar to those that had once seemed insurmountable to Maya herself. "What kind of support are you planning to provide?" Maya asked. "Financial grants, of course, but also mentorship programs and access to industry connections. We want to address both the practical and systemic obstacles that prevent talented people from building sustainable careers in creative fields." "I was hoping you might consider serving on our advisory board," Vivian added, looking directly at Maya. "Your experience with building a business while maintaining ethical standards could provide valuable guidance for the artists we're hoping to support." Maya felt moved by the invitation, understanding that it represented Vivian's recognition of her expertise, while also offering an opportunity to collaborate on projects that aligned with her values. "I would be honored to participate," Maya said. "This sounds like exactly the kind of work that could make a real difference in people's lives." The conversation continued late into the evening, with the three of them developing ideas about how the foundation might operate and the types of programs that would be most beneficial for emerging creatives. Maya found herself energized by the prospect of contributing to systemic changes that could benefit future generations of artists and designers. 2 weeks before the wedding, Maya returned to San Francisco for the final dress fitting, bringing her head seamstress, Patricia, to ensure that every detail of the construction met the standards that had become synonymous with her work. Vivian arrived at the boutique that Maya had rented for the fitting, accompanied by her mother and Maya's mother, creating a small gathering that felt both formal and intimate. The moment when Vivian first saw herself in the completed dress was one that Maya knew she would remember for the rest of her life. Her cousin stood before the mirror in silence for several long moments, taking in the way the hand-painted silk caught the afternoon light and the way the carefully constructed silhouette enhanced her natural grace and confidence. "Maya," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion, "this is the most beautiful thing I've ever worn. Thank you for creating something so perfect for me." Maya felt tears gathering in her own eyes as she watched her cousin examine the intricate details of the beadwork and appreciate the way the dress moved with her body. This was the moment she had been working toward for months, the tangible proof that their relationship had been transformed from competition into something approaching genuine sisterhood. "You look like a queen," Aunt Linda said, her voice carrying pride that felt different from the anxious approval-seeking that had characterized her responses to Vivian's achievements in earlier years. Maya's mother moved closer to examine the hand-painted details of the silk, understanding for perhaps the first time the level of skill and artistry that Maya's work represented. "I never fully appreciated what you do," Susan said quietly to Maya. "Seeing the stress, understanding the hours and expertise that went into every detail, I realized that I was thinking of your work as a hobby when it's actually a form of art." The acknowledgement felt both validating and bittersweet, representing the kind of recognition that Maya had craved during her earlier career, but no longer needed for her sense of self-worth. The fitting proceeded with the kind of careful attention to detail that Maya demanded for all her custom work, with Patricia making minor adjustments to ensure that the dress would photograph beautifully and move gracefully during the ceremony and reception. Vivian proved to be an ideal client, understanding the importance of precise fit and willing to stand patiently while every seam and hem was perfected. As they concluded the fitting, Vivian asked to speak with Maya privately, leading her to a quiet corner of the rented space where they could talk without being overheard by their mothers. "I want you to know that wearing this dress feels like carrying a piece of your love and creativity with me on the most important day of my life. But I also want to apologize again for taking your graduation dress all those years ago. I understand now that I wasn't just borrowing a piece of clothing, I was claiming ownership of your work and your dreams." Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that once accompanied thoughts of that betrayal, but now the sensation was tempered by understanding and forgiveness that had developed through years of difficult conversations and genuine change. "That dress served its purpose," Maya replied. "It taught us both lessons that we needed to learn, even if the process was painful. Do you ever wonder what might have happened if I hadn't taken it? If we had found a way to support each other from the beginning instead of competing?"
Maya considered the question carefully. understanding that it represented the kind of alternative history speculation that could either promote healing or perpetuate regret, depending on how it was approached. I think we both needed to make our own mistakes and find our own paths before we could appreciate what we could offer each other, Maya said finally. The timing might have been different, but I believe we would have eventually found our way to this understanding. I hope our children grew up in a family where that kind of competition isn't necessary, Vivian said, unconsciously placing her hand on her abdomen in a gesture that made Maya wonder if there was news that hadn't yet been shared. Are you telling me something I should know? Maya asked with a smile. Vivian laughed, recognizing that her unconscious gesture had revealed information she had planned to keep private until after the wedding. David and I wanted to wait until after the honeymoon to make any announcements, but yes, we're expecting. Very early still, but we wanted to start our married life knowing that we're already building a family. Maya felt a rush of joy and anticipation that surprised her with its intensity, understanding that this news represented not just her cousin's happiness, but also the beginning of a new generation that could grow up without the competitive dynamics that had shaped their own relationship. "I'm so happy for you both," Maya said, embracing Vivian with genuine warmth. "This child is going to be so loved and supported." "I hope you'll be involved in their life," Vivian said, not just as a family member, but as someone who can teach them about creativity and hard work and following their dreams. The wedding ceremony took place on a perfect October afternoon in Golden Gate Park, with the eucalyptus trees providing a natural cathedral that felt both majestic and intimate. Maya watched from the front row as Vivian walked down the aisle wearing the dress that had consumed months of her attention and care, understanding that this moment represented the culmination of years of healing and growth for their entire family. David's face as he watched his bride approach was a study in joy and reverence that made Maya believe in the possibility of love that was based on genuine appreciation rather than need or competition. Vivian moved with confidence and grace, clearly comfortable in her own skin and secure in the choice she was making. The ceremony itself was a blend of traditional elements and personal touches that reflected both families' values and the couple's individual personalities. Maya found herself thinking about the foundation that Vivian and David were planning to establish, understanding that their commitment to supporting emerging artists represented an extension of the values that had guided their courtship and would likely influence their approach to marriage and parenthood. During the reception, Maya was approached by several guests who recognized her work and wanted to discuss potential commissions or collaborations. She found herself distributing business cards and scheduling preliminary consultations, reminded that her reputation now extended beyond fashion industry insiders to include the kinds of socially conscious consumers who were likely to appreciate her commitment to sustainable practices. Catherine Morrison, who had flown in from New York to attend the wedding, spent much of the evening discussing the possibility of expanding their partnership to include home goods and accessories that would apply Maya's aesthetic sensibilities to products beyond clothing. "Your work has such a distinctive voice," Catherine observed, as they watched Vivian and David share their first dance as a married couple. "I think there's enormous potential for translating that vision into other categories of luxury goods." Maya nodded thoughtfully, understanding that such expansion would represent another significant step in the evolution of her career, but also recognizing that her primary focus needed to remain on perfecting the fashion line that had become her signature offering. "I'm interested in exploring those possibilities," Maya replied, "but I want to make sure that expansion doesn't compromise the quality and attention to detail that have become synonymous with my work." "That's exactly the approach that makes you the right partner for Morrison Industries," Catherine said. "We're not interested in rapid expansion that sacrifices brand integrity. We want sustainable growth that enhances rather than dilutes what makes your work special." As the evening progressed, Maya found herself observing the interactions between family members and friends, noting how the atmosphere of celebration had dissolved many of the tensions and hierarchies that had once made family gatherings uncomfortable for everyone involved. Her parents seemed genuinely relaxed and happy, engaging in conversations that didn't revolve around comparisons or competitions.
Her grandmother moved through the crowd with the kind of satisfaction that came from witnessing the resolution of conflicts she had worried about for years. Near the end of the reception, Vivian approached Maya carrying a small wrapped package that she presented with the kind of ceremony that suggested significant meaning. I wanted to give you something to commemorate today and to thank you for creating such a perfect dress for me. Maya unwrapped the package to reveal a vintage sewing kit that had belonged to their great-grandmother, complete with hand-forged needles and silk thread that had somehow survived decades of storage without deteriorating. I found this in my mother's attic when we were cleaning out old family belongings. It seemed like it should belong to the person who is carrying on her tradition of creating beautiful things. Maya felt overwhelmed by the significance of this gift, understanding that it connected her not just to our family history, but to a lineage of women who had used creativity and skill to build better lives for themselves and their families. This is incredibly meaningful, Maya said, carefully examining the tools that had once been used by the woman whose path she was following in her own contemporary way. Thank you for recognizing that connection. I think she would be proud of what you've accomplished, not just the business success, but the way you've used your talent to create opportunities for other people and to prove that ethical practices can be commercially viable. As Maya drove back to her hotel that evening, she reflected on the distance she had traveled from the woman who had once been consumed by competition and resentment to someone who could genuinely celebrate her cousin's happiness while also building a career that aligned with her deepest values. The transformation hadn't been easy or quick, requiring years of therapy, difficult conversations, and conscious choices about how to respond to opportunities and challenges. The following morning, Maya received a call from Lauren with news that would shape the next phase of her career development. A documentary filmmaker who had been following the Morrison Industries partnership wanted to create a feature-length film about sustainable fashion, with Maya's story serving as the central narrative thread. She's not just interested in covering the business aspects, she wants to explore how personal values intersect with professional choices and how individual designers can influence industry-wide changes in practices and priorities. Maya felt both excited and apprehensive about the prospect of such public exposure, understanding that documentary coverage could significantly amplify her influence while also subjecting her personal history and business practices to scrutiny from audiences beyond the fashion industry. What kind of access would she need? Maya asked, already beginning to consider the implications of allowing cameras into her design process and business operations. Complete access to your studios, meetings with Morrison Industries executives, interviews with family members and employees, basically documenting how you balance creative vision with corporate responsibility. Maya recognized that participating in such a documentary would represent another significant step in her evolution from boutique designer to industry leader, but she also understood that visibility came with responsibilities that extended beyond her immediate business interests. I need to think about this carefully. The story they tell could influence how other people understand sustainable fashion and the possibilities for ethical business practices. That's exactly why I think you should consider it, Lauren said. Your approach to business has proven that you don't have to choose between financial success and environmental responsibility. A documentary could help other designers and entrepreneurs understand how to implement similar practices. Over the following weeks, Maya met with the documentary team to discuss their vision for the film and the kinds of stories they hope to tell through her example. She was impressed by their commitment to accuracy and their understanding that the most compelling narratives come from honest examination of both successes and failures, rather than superficial celebration of achievements. After careful consideration and consultation with Catherine Morrison and her legal team, Maya agreed to participate in the documentary project, understanding that it represented an opportunity to influence conversations about sustainable business practices that extended far beyond the fashion industry. The filming process required Maya to articulate her philosophy and approach in ways that would be accessible to general audiences, while also providing enough detail to be useful for industry professionals who might want to implement similar practices. She found herself revisiting the early days of her career and the family dynamics that had shaped her understanding of competition and collaboration, recognizing patterns and influences that had previously operated below the level of conscious awareness. One of the most challenging aspects of the documentary process was allowing cameras to capture the Morrison Industries board meetings where decisions about manufacturing and labor practices were made. Maya had insisted that these discussions be included in the film because she believed that transparency about corporate decision-making was essential to proving that sustainable practices were genuinely integrated into business operations rather than simply marketing messages designed to appeal to environmentally conscious consumers. The documentary team also spent time filming at the Vermont manufacturing facility, documenting the working conditions and interviewing employees about their experiences with Morrison Industries' approach to labor relations. Maya felt proud of what the cameras captured, understanding that the footage would provide concrete evidence of the company's commitment to fair wages and safe working environments. 6 months after filming concluded, Maya attended the documentary's premiere at the Sundance Film Festival, accompanied by Catherine Morrison and several Morrison Industries employees who had been featured in the film. The screening was followed by a panel discussion about sustainable business practices that included perspectives from environmental advocates, labor organizers, and other business leaders who were implementing similar approaches in their own industries. The audience reception exceeded Maya's expectations, with questions that demonstrated genuine interest in the practical aspects of building sustainable businesses, rather than just superficial appreciation for environmental messaging. She found herself engaged in conversations with entrepreneurs from various industries who wanted to understand how her approach might be adapted to their own contexts and challenges. Following the festival premiere, the documentary was acquired by a streaming platform that specialized in socially conscious content, ensuring that it would reach audiences who were already interested in environmental and labor issues. The film's release generated significant media coverage that positioned Maya as a thought leader in sustainable business practices rather than simply a successful fashion designer. The increased visibility led to speaking engagements at universities and conferences, where Maya found herself addressing audiences of business students and industry professionals who were interested in understanding how ethical considerations could be integrated into strategic planning and operational decision-making. These presentations required her to develop new skills in public speaking and audience engagement, but they also provided opportunities to influence how future business leaders thought about the relationship between profitability and social responsibility. During one particularly memorable speaking engagement at Stanford University, a student asked Maya whether she believed that her approach to sustainable fashion could be scaled to the level of major international corporations without losing the attention to detail and ethical commitment that had made her work distinctive. "That's the question that keeps me awake at night," Maya replied honestly. "I think the answer depends on whether corporate leaders are willing to accept lower profit margins in exchange for better labor practices and environmental outcomes. It also depends on consumers being willing to pay higher prices for products that reflect the true costs of ethical manufacturing." The question sparked a discussion that continued long after the formal presentation ended, with students and faculty members sharing insights about the challenges and opportunities for sustainable business practices in various industries. Maya left the university feeling energized by the engagement and optimism of young people who seemed genuinely committed to building more ethical approaches to business and consumption. 2 years after the documentary's release, Maya received an invitation that would represent the culmination of her transformation from local boutique owner to internationally recognized leader in sustainable fashion. The United Nations wanted her to address their annual conference on sustainable development, speaking specifically about how private sector innovation could contribute to environmental protection and social justice goals. Preparing for this presentation required Maya to think beyond her own business experience to consider how the principles that had guided her work might be applied across different industries and cultural contexts. She spent weeks researching successful examples of sustainable business practices from around the world, developing a presentation that would provide practical guidance while also inspiring ambitious thinking about what was possible when business leaders prioritized long-term value creation over short-term profit maximization. The United Nations speech was delivered to an audience that included government officials, nonprofit leaders, and business executives from dozens of countries, representing the kind of global platform that Maya had never imagined when she first decided to focus on sustainable fashion design. The presentation was simultaneously humbling and empowering, requiring her to speak with authority about complex international issues while remaining grounded in the practical experience that had given her credibility in the first place. During the question and answer session that followed her presentation, Maya was asked whether she believed that individual businesses could create meaningful change in global environmental and labor practices, or whether systemic transformation required government regulation and international coordination. I think both approaches are necessary, Maya replied. Individual businesses can demonstrate what's possible and create market demand for better practices, but achieving transformation at the scale required to address climate change and global inequality probably requires policy changes that level the playing field for companies that want to do the right thing. The response generated follow-up questions about the role of consumer education and the challenges of competing against companies that externalized environmental and social costs, leading to a discussion that continued during the networking reception that followed the formal session. As Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from a young woman whose dreams were constantly undermined by family competition to someone who is addressing world leaders about sustainable business practices, she understood that the most meaningful transformations often begin with personal healing that creates space for broader influence and impact. The vintage sewing kit that Vivian had given her at the wedding now occupied a place of honor in her Vermont studio, serving as a daily reminder of the heritage she carried forward and the responsibility that came with her platform and influence. Each time she used the hand-forged needles that had once belonged to her great-grandmother, Maya thought about the continuity of women's work across generations and the ways that individual creativity could contribute to collective progress towards more just and sustainable ways of living. The foundation that Vivian and David had established had grown into a significant force for supporting emerging artists and designers from underrepresented communities, with Maya serving on the advisory board and providing mentorship to selected recipients. Watching these young creatives develop their own voices and build sustainable careers reminded Maya of her own early struggles and the importance of having advocates who believed in her potential before she had achieved commercial success. Vivian's daughter, born 8 months after the wedding, had become a source of joy and wonder for the entire extended family, representing the possibility of raising a child in an environment where creativity was celebrated rather than feared, and where success was understood as something that could be shared rather than hoarded. Maya found herself thinking about the world that this child would inherit and the responsibility that all adults shared for creating systems and institutions that would support rather than constrain future generations. The Morrison Industries partnership had evolved beyond clothing to include home goods and accessories that applied Maya's aesthetic sensibilities to products that enhanced daily life rather than just special occasions. Each new product line required the same careful attention to sustainable materials and ethical manufacturing that had become synonymous with Maya's brand, but the expanded offerings also provided opportunities to reach consumers who might not have previously considered the environmental and social implications of their purchasing decisions. As Maya prepared for another United Nations presentation, this time focused specifically on how fashion industry practices could contribute to climate change mitigation, she reflected on the unpredictable path that had led from personal betrayal to global recognition. The verse that Vivian had taken years earlier had indeed become a catalyst for transformation, but not in the ways that either one of them could have anticipated when they were young women trapped in competitive dynamics that diminished them both. The story that had begun with theft and revenge had evolved into something far more complex and ultimately more satisfying than simple vindication or success. Maya had learned that the most meaningful achievements come not from defeating others, but from creating value that benefits entire communities, and that true leadership requires the ability to transform personal wounds into sources of wisdom and compassion.
standing before another international audience, wearing shoes that connected her to a heritage of women who had used skill and determination to build better lives for their families. Maya understood that her greatest accomplishment wasn't any individual design or business success, but rather the demonstration that it was possible to pursue ambitious goals while maintaining integrity and creating opportunities for others to flourish as well. The young woman who had once believed that success required winning competitions against family members had become someone who understood that the most sustainable achievements come from lifting others